Alright, hello again everybody. Let's see here, so we've already got a few tutorials down for a lot of the other parts in this image, and most of the complex stuff is already done. The skin tones, the hair, the eyes are already set, so everything else is going to be really straightforward as we get this all done here. So, first of all, just want to wish you guys a good evening. I've been working for probably about 6-7 hours straight so far tonight. So hopefully, once I'm done with all this, I will be set and be able to move on to other important things like sleep. So anyway, to the handful of people who've already come into the room, top of the evening, happy to have you here. And this is just going to be a generic odds and ends tutorial, and I'm just going to be banging out random, how to do these various objects as I get to them. And I'm pretty much just going to be working from the top down on this. So let's start out with the largest element in this scene, which is going to be her latex bodysuit. And this is going to be where most of the time is going to be spent on the rest of this image. And so the way I'm going to start out is the same way I pulled out the eyes, the hair, and the skin tones, is I'm going to go to my flats layer right here. And using the color wand, with the color wand set so it's at tolerance 0, anti-alias, contiguous, and sample all layers off, I am going to select all the various different elements of this bodysuit. And there we go. Let's check to make sure we got everything. I don't want that. Yeah, let's take those as well. Let's take the choker and the mask as well. And now that I have that all set, I'm just going to pull it out into its own separate layer by pressing Ctrl-J. So now that I have it separated out into its own layer, I'm going to give it a shadow layer, just much in the same way I do with everything else, but you'll notice that this image, this layer right here is already quite dark. These are some pretty dark colors, so it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to see what's going on as I shade it. So to compensate for that, I'm going to create a duplicate layer. So I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm just going to click and drag this layer right here. So now the layer with the catsuit on it now is a duplicate, and I am just going to lighten it with the curves. So I press Ctrl-M to pull up the curves menu, and I'm just going to lighten it by pulling up the curves like this. So that way, I'm going to link it like this, and then I'm going to create a new layer, fill it with the purple that I'm going to use for my shadow color. I'm going to set the layer mode to multiply. I am going to hold down Alt and click in between the layers to link them together. And there we go. So now I can at least see what I'm doing still, because if that last layer wasn't there, that brighter layer wasn't there, it's going to be much harder for me to see what I'm doing. So let's give it a layer mask. And with the layer mask selected, not the RGB channel, but with the layer mask selected, I select the eraser. Let's set the eraser to a large feathered brush, and let's just go at it. Now, fortunately, the inker did a really good job at determining and defining the form and the curvature of the outfit, so I'm not going to have to spend a terrible amount of time into this. And considering that the outfit is already pretty dark, the shadows don't need to be too on target. The dark color of the outfit gives me a little bit more leeway when it comes to the shadows that are on there. So since the shadows are coming, as I've determined through the skin tones, from the upper right, the lower left of these parts, especially around really curved parts like her breast, for example, are going to be really dark around there and really bright up here, because it's capturing all the light as well as expressing all the shadow as well. Let's get her shoulder socket in place. And again, I'm just going to work really loose. I'm not going to be too pent up on getting all the details right. And what I'm going to do as I go down her torso is I'm going to try and get some better edges in here. So after I have that set in place, I'm going to go to my smudge tool. Let's go with a larger brush for the smudge tool. And for the strength, I'm going to change it from 60% to 80%. So now I can actually smudge inside of the layer mask. And I can get myself some more precise edges here. So I switched to the eraser, put in some more eraser marks, switch to the smudge tool, which is R, by the way. The shortcut key for the smudge tool is R. So I press R to switch to the smudge tool. I'm just getting some more details like that. Press E to switch to the eraser. Press R to switch to the smudge tool. Pull it in like that. Erasing all that away. And now I'm going to start conveying a little bit of the musculature of her abdomen right there. Kind of pulling it around like that. And then since there's a definitive fold, as we can see right here, where the latex kind of folds in on itself, I'm going to go with a smaller smudge tool. Just pull it in like that. Switch to the eraser. This one's going to be a very narrow strip right here, so a very narrow highlight right there. Pull it in. Just a little bit right here. Another one right here that gets pulled in all the way across the pelvic area. And this is how I do most fabrics as well, is I'll erase away an amount of the shadow layer and then I'll smudge accordingly to kind of pull it into in a certain direction to make it look like the fabric is flowing in a single uniform direction or flowing with the contour of the body of whomever's wearing it. But for this outfit right here, I don't have to put too much effort into the folds of the fabric because it's latex. It's gonna hug the skin really tightly. Let's go like that. And now what I'm gonna do is, since we got this leg behind the other leg, I am going to go to the flats layer that I have right there. Gonna switch it to the color wand, tolerance at 0, anti-alias, contiguous, sample all layers, still off, good. And I'm just gonna select the leg right there, and you'll see that I have a little bit of shading right there that is bled into this leg. So with that part selected, I'm going to go to this shadow layer that I have, go back to my eraser. That is correct. I want it to be black, so now it's going to be darkening it. I'm going to set it to 100% opacity just to make sure I get that all covered up. And then going back to the white, setting it to 30% opacity by pressing 3 on the keyboard. And again, just really simply going like this. I'm going to switch it with X to go to dark, switch with X to go to light. Just get the top of the knee there down. And then while I have this selected in a way that's separate from the torso, I can even pull a drop shadow across. So I'm going to go with a smaller brush at just 20. I'm going to set the brush opacity to 100%. And I'm just going to pull a little drop shadow coming across like that. And I don't have to worry about the dark shadow affecting anything over here because it's not selected. And now I'm just going to go across the image. I'm going to find other spots where I can put drop shadows as well. So, for example, on her hand right here, let me select that. I'm going to go back to this layer. You can have a drop shadow coming across from the ball of yarn in her hand, for example. Let me put some more detailing here in those fingers real quick, since we've got the nail right there. Smudge it up like that, erase all that, smudge it up like that. Erasing, smudging, erasing, smudging, erasing, smudging, erase, smudge. And there we go. Let's really define the drop shadow there. We're also going to have some drop shadows. Are we anywhere in this? Probably about right here. Just a really narrow one right there being cast by the ring finger right there. And maybe a little bit of one cast from the middle finger right there. And we'll just define that edge right there. And I want to blend the shoulder into her arm like that, as well as into the breast like that. Just gonna pull it out like this, so it kind of makes it all a single flowing piece of fabric like that. And I'm just experimenting around right here, seeing if it'll look any good. And it looks alright. I'm gonna use the eraser to kind of just blend those out a little bit. That looks good. And so let's pull that up just a little bit further so we can get the armpit in place there. And then there's going to be a drop shadow from her arm right here. So I'm going to go to the flats, select the torso part of the flats. I'm going to go back and just put a drop shadow for where her arm would be blocking the light source being cast onto her. So just like that. And even a little bit right here. There's going to be a little bit of a drop shadow right there as well. There we go. And similarly, on her right breast, there's going to be a drop shadow being cast from the other breast, like that. And on her torso, we're going to have a drop shadow from one breast, like that right there. And I'm going to just make that all dark right there, because don't know what happened there. Probably a problem with the flatting that I did. And yeah, I still need to finish up this arm as well. But once this arm is done, then the shading's going to be done, and the shading doesn't even have to be that concise. And when I get into the highlighting, it'll be a lot more... what's the word I'm looking at? A lot quicker to go through. The highlighting is a lot easier to do than determining the shadow. Yep, so a quick hello to everybody in the chat room who's showing up. Getting viewers. We are getting viewers. Go us. And, yes, Angelina smiles. I do talk. I got myself a headphone, or a headset this week. I'm still getting accustomed to the whole thing. I'm not a very social human being, so I don't even know if I'm speaking the right language here. I haven't really had a lot of people around me to affirm that I actually am speaking English. When they smile and nod, I just think they're trying to be polite. Alright, so a couple more drop shadows that are going to appear on this arm right here. A drop shadow from this fluffy bit around her collar. For sure. Like that. Oh, Angelina, I'm glad that you understand me, because half the time not even I understand me. Okay. Little drop shadow right there. Right, I'm just gonna darken those parts right there. Let's lighten this part of the collar. Use the smudge tool to kind of push it at the top so we got the ridge going around it. Alright, now, remember that layer that I made earlier, the one that's a little bit brighter? If we just take it away, that's a little bit closer to what we want it to look like. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a single color of this, which will, let's go with that color right there, and create a new layer. So I create a new layer, select this color of the PVC, or the PVC outfit, I'm just going to fill it like that. And since I don't need this layer anymore, I'm just going to delete it. Turn on the shadows. And since the shadows are separate from this layer that I just made, I can actually reduce the brightness of that as well. So now that the shadows are in place, I don't have to worry about being able to see them. I can actually darken the outfit accordingly. And let's keep going. So kind of like what I did with the skin tones. I'm going to hold down Shift, select all three of these layers. I'm going to hold down Alt and just drag it up a notch like that. So now I have a copy of all three of those layers. I'm going to merge the copy of those three layers by pressing Control E. And now, since it's in its own separate layer and it's linked to what I've been doing so far, I don't have to worry about painting outside of the edges and it appearing. It will stay confined to the space of the outfit. So I set my brush mode to color dodge. I'm going to set it to 20% opacity. I don't know if that's what I'm going to stick with though. I'm just going to do a couple of exploratory, experimental strokes. This will work. 20% seems fine. And just in the same way, I'm just going to paint in some highlights like that. Since this part around her hips is kind of facing up a little bit, I'm going to make that a bit brighter than most everything else. And now since it's a PVC latex, it's going to have a lot of shine to it, but the shine of it is going to be really small. So it's going to be intense, but it's going to be small. So let's just go with setting the brush mode to linear dodge. I'm going to increase its opacity to, let's go about 50%. And let's just try this out. Just put a couple blotches down, see how it looks, and that looks fine to me, so I'm just going to run with that. So I'm going to start out, I'm actually going to be using the inking that's already been put in, and I'm just going to follow the inking for where the highlights should be. So wherever those bright spots appear, I'm going to run with those. So kind of like right here. Go with one underneath like that. Let's see, one underneath about right there. Top side here. So there's going to be a couple more up here where the fingers are. And then for the underside, for the reflected light, I'm going to change the opacity. So instead of 50%, we're just going to go with 30%, so it's not going to be nearly as intense. Just for getting some of that reflected light that's going to be going around. So it's going to be one right there. And kind of around the collar area. Alright, we're starting to get the feel for it. Next thing I'm going to do is that there's kind of a chrome effect that I want to do on this. So the chrome effect is going to affect the whole thing, and it's going to be a bit of a drastic addition that might not work. And since I know that there's going to be some risk in adding this, I'm just going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to duplicate this layer, pulling it together like so. I'm going to change it to color dodge, and I'm just going to use a really large brush like so. And chrome effects are actually very subtle. I don't want it to stand out too much in this, so I'm going to change its opacity from 30% to 5%. And let's just see how that looks. I can probably bump it up to 10%. There we go. And I'm just very loosely throwing the brush over this until it starts to look like it's reflecting the environment a little bit. So again, it's just a color dodge brush, hard edge, very large, set to a very low opacity, in this case just 10%. In many cases I'll go lower than that. I'm just kind of following the contours of the different folds in the fabric. We'll especially be able to see it here on the leg as I go around like this. There needs to be a large highlight there, so I'm just going to add that real quickly. So setting it to linear dodge, opacity 50%. There we go. And maybe one more right there. And one right there. Okay. And some one here on the choker. And set it to 20% color dodge, just to determine a little bit of the mask. And if I want the mask to have a bit of a flat chrome look to it, I'm gonna set it to color dodge, turn it up a little bit, and I'm just gonna make diagonal streaks. There we go. And now it's a little bit brighter than I want it to be, so I can always just go into the curves and I can reduce the brightness of it, which I was planning to do the whole time. I usually do this anyway when it comes to black leather. I like to work from dark and make things brighter, just so that I can get the details in, and then when I darken an image I'm not going to be losing details or losing contrast. So it's working from dark to light and then having to push it back to dark if I need to be. So let's get the rim lights in place now. I'm going to do the rim lighting very similarly to how I did it with the hair. I'm just going to set it to linear dodge. And I'm going to keep the hard edge brush because the PVC texture kind of demands a hard edge. And we just go around like so. I'm going to select the fingers like that where they're different. So I see that when I first flatted this image, when I made these three fingers right here a different color from these two fingers, is because when they overlap I'm still able to get the rim light in without the rim light actually bleeding into them, so I can keep them separate. It allows me to work faster. So just like that, see how I'm making brush strokes right there, but it's not bleeding into her middle finger. So there we go. Nice and quick. Rim lights are on her hands. Just pull down that one. And I didn't like that stroke, so try it again. There you go. Just a little bit of detailing there. So the rim light is kind of being pulled in by the folds in the fabric around her elbow there. So you're going to go to the flats layer. I'm going to select the right breast right there. Again, just going to get the rim light in place. And what you'll see the rim light does is, let me just hide the selection really quickly, is that it separates out the different parts of it so that even though everything on her is black, the rim light around the breast right here separates it from her arm. And now that I kind of look at that, that's a little bit too intense. I don't really like that too terribly much. Let's keep it at that. Let's have the intense color up here in the lower left just to make it more consistent with everything. Alright, so that's what we have. Going to press Control D to deselect that. I'm just going to keep on going. A little bit right there. I'm going to select the left breast now. It's slightly bigger. I'm going to use the smudge tool really quickly, just kind of pull it along like this. Alright. Let's see here. Do I want the rim light behind her or under her? I'm gonna go with behind her. So I'm gonna reduce the brush opacity just to try this out. There we go, just like that. Maybe a little more. The top of her kneecap would probably pick up a little bit of it right there. And then similarly, I'm going to select her other leg and have that pick up a little bit of the rim light as well. Not much, so I'm going to hide the selection just so I can see what I'm doing. And there we go. Just so her left leg is picking up just a little bit of the rim light, not a lot of it. There we go. Let's see, this rim light would also appear on her abdomen as well, so just a little bit like this. A little bit kind of caught by the ribs as well. So even though there's nothing in this spot right here, even though the inks just have it solid black, I'm still going to add details to it. After all, that is what a colorist needs to do, is add in details that both the colorist and the inker couldn't fit in there. In particular, things like texture and lighting. Now, you can't depend on an inker or a pencil artist to get all those in anyway. That always falls on the colorist. So let's see, let's get that rim light in there. Deselect it. And I'm going to use a feather brush. I'm going to switch it over to color dodge really quickly. Just to really pull out that purple color. That pinkish purple. Set it to 20% opacity. There we go. And we still need it here around her mask. Actually, no, I don't. And here's why. I do not need a rim light there on her mask, because her hair would be blocking it anyway. So I'll put it here on the bridge of her nose, but not on the edge of her face. Okay. And now we got one more rim light that we have in here, which is going to be the yellow, which we can see a little bit of it here in her hair, not so much in the skin tones, but we'll be seeing it quite prominently around this area. Just get a good stroke right there. Just like that. Now I gotta be careful though. You'll see that this rim light is kind of bleeding into the hair, so we're losing the separation and the depth there. So I'm actually going to undo all that I did right there. At least undo it as far as I can, which unfortunately isn't all the way. Oh well. I know a way around that. I'm just going to make it full on white like that. So yeah, change of plan. So now we're going to have a very intense rim light over here. So something kind of like a street light we'll be seeing right there. Just going to pull it in like that, and we're not going to see much of a rim light on this because it's blocked by the ball of yarn and her other finger. Smudge this down so it just kind of blends in a little bit better. Let's pull this out just a little bit. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit here. Set it to 10%. Smudge it. Just kind of pull it around like that. And even a little bit here. You can paint rim lights on top of each other, and it blends in pretty well, fortunately, through this method. Finishing up here around the edges, and there we go. Just going to go with a large feather brush, set it to color dodge, and we're just going to go around some of those areas to make it a little bit more intense. But there we go. That's the general gist of it. And again, as I've always been doing, I'm going to take what I have there and I'm going to make it just a little bit darker, using both the hue saturation and the curves, like so. And just doing one last pass over these highlights just to make them brighter. There we go. Not that intense. Now if I want to be really fancy and make this PVC look really chromatic, I actually have a sequence of filters that you can do, and this is something that I do a good amount. I don't do it as much as I used to, but it still looks good. So I'll show you how to do it really quickly. So check this out. You select all the layers that you just worked with, so this is everything for that PVC outfit. I'm going to hold down Alt, drag it up, and then I'm going to press Control E, because you'll see I have two copies right here, or two different sets of the same exact series of layers. I'm going to press Control E to merge all these together. You'll see it's already linked to the group underneath it, or to the other layers underneath it. So there you go. This is just a copy of all the layers underneath it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to desaturate it, so I'm going to press Control-Shift-U to make it all just grayscale. And then I'm going to adjust the levels of it. And what I'm going to do is just try and find the midpoint of the levels. So I pull it over like that. I'm going to want to pull it over like this. Pull this over like so. So now I have a good grayscale rendition of what's underneath it. It's also quite visible. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to the default colors. I'm going to go to Filter, Sketch, Chrome. Now I tell people not to use filters too much, not to depend on them, unless they really know what they're doing. And this would be a case of knowing what you're doing. Because you'll see we'll get an effect kind of like this all the way over, and since it's on a separate layer, don't worry about murdering your image or anything. So let me just show some extension of the details that we have here. Under the Chrome menu, you'll see I have the detail set to 0, the smoothness set to 10. That's how I want it to be. So let's move this back over, press OK, and now I have this chromed rendition of what I just did. There we go. And that looks really bad on its own, obviously. So we're going to have to set it to a different layer mode. So I select my layer modes and I'm going to change it from normal to soft light, just to see if that looks any good. That looks better. And I'm going to reduce the fill of the soft light. Now I'm not going to reduce the opacity, I'm going to reduce the fill, because soft light has a certain effect on the pixels underneath it, and the fill reduces that effect. Opacity just reduces the, the transparency of the layer itself. Fill has more to do with the effect that the soft light does. So I'm taking the soft light effect and making it even softer. And you'll see I'm just keeping it at a very low 12%, yet I get a really nice subtle chrome effect going across the whole outfit, especially around these areas where it gets a little bit brighter. So it just gives me a little bit of extra detail, a little bit of an extra bit of texture to sell that outfit as being made of latex. So let us take all these layers, merge them together because we're done. Merge them all together like so. And now we are very close to done. For the jewel in her hand, we're going to be doing a brushing effect similar to what we did with the hair, where we're going to set the brush mode to linear dodge, and then we're going to make several brush strokes on top of each other to give kind of a very shiny effect to it. So I have it selected under my flats. I'm going to separate it from the flats by pressing Control J. So now I have it set as its own layer, like that. And I'm going to start out by making it much darker, because it's easier to work from super dark to super light, as opposed to working somewhere in the middle, or heaven help you, working from light to dark. So I start out by selecting a hard edge brush, going to set it to linear dodge, going to turn up the opacity of it. And I'm going to set the color to this green color by holding down Alt and clicking on that green color. So there we go. If I make brush strokes on it, I get something kind of like this happening. But since the gem is kind of made up of different flat surfaces, I'm instead going to use the lasso tool. In fact, not even that, I'm going to set it to the polygonal lasso tool. So I can just select certain segments of its surface, like so. So I'm going to have to visualize the actual surfaces of this gem. And then I'm going to lock the layers alpha. And with this selection in place, I'm going to get to my brush, And I'm just going to paint around the edges and literally on top of it a couple of times. And I'm going to hide the selection really quickly. So this is what I have for the top so far, which that looks fine. So again, going to pull out the edges like so. It's okay if they overlap a little bit because, oops, because the overlapping elements, let me zoom in on this, right here where the selection overlaps the stuff I already did, it's actually going to look pretty good when it overlaps using this brushing method. So let's go like that, give it a little bit of a chrome effect like so. I'm going to pull the edges to be a little bit brighter like so. Like that, a little bit brighter edge like that. And so on and so forth. So now I'm just going to go around and do all the different surfaces. Just like that. Now I envision this area kind of having a certain spot right here that would really pick up the light source. So I'm really going to pull it out, make it nice and bright right there. Alright, deselect it. And you'll see it's starting to look like a gem. Oh, let's see here. This little part right here, this is totally facing the light source. So I'm going to turn up our opacity to 100% just to really drive it. And I want it to be really bright like there, just like that. There we go. So that'll be the one side of the gem that really pops out, that really captures the glimmer of it. Right, so let's deselect it. Set the brush opacity back to 60% by pressing the number 6 on the keyboard. And let's just keep on going. That should do it. I'm going to save this really quickly. Now the reason why a lot of these lines kind of have breaks in them, how I kind of do this thing going down, is because that means that it's going to be reflecting different objects in the scene that you don't see. These little lines are kind of the outline or the edges of objects that are behind the viewer that they can't see, or objects that are at a different perspective. It's just basically reflecting an image and kind of stretching it out a little bit. But by doing this effect where I do a lot of straight lines, it's a very quick way to convey that effect. Right, let's just keep on going. Want that part there to be really bright. Kind of a little bit of a reflected part of it right there. Alright, and hello, Miss Cardine. Thank you for swinging by the room. I am doing well. Much appreciated your note. Since that's going to be kind of away from everything, I'm just going to reduce the curves of it, just like that. Well, Angelina, I learned a color just mostly by teaching myself. I've been doing this since I was in high school, and it's mostly just pressing buttons in Photoshop and learning how to do it. A lot of the brush techniques I learned to do, though, actually came when I did photography back in the mid-2000s. So that was when I learned how to use adjustment layers, for example. And I'll be going into adjustment layers a little bit later on. But those are key to helping me get that red to blue style that I love to put in all my images. And in fact, whenever I download a wallpaper or something of a painting I really like, it's not uncommon that I'll actually take it into Photoshop first, not only to sharpen it, but I'll also give it some certain effects, like increasing the color of it, or just, you know, messing around with it so it looks good on my monitor. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll look good on everyone's monitor, but it looks good on mine, and that's really all I care about when I make my wallpapers. Alright, so I'm going to do some extra shape definition in here, just doing a really soft brush. And what I'm doing with this shape definition is I'm actually defining the edges on the other end of the gem that we can't see, but since the gem is semi-transparent, the light is still going to refract through it. So I'm just kind of fudging around with it like this, and just using a really soft brush. And there we go. That's how our gem is supposed to look. So that actually turned out quite nicely. So whomever said to go with the green gem, an excellent choice. Alright, so next item. Let's go with... the ball of yarn's too easy. Let's go with something difficult. Let's go with the fluffy stuff around here. And the fluffy stuff, I'm going to do it almost identically to how I did the hair, but I'm going to do it even faster. So I'm going to start out selecting the flats layer, selecting my color wand, tolerance at 0, and everything else unchecked. I'm going to select the fluffy part, make sure all the other fluff is selected as well, which it is. Good. I'm going to make it a little bit darker with the hue saturation, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is, since these strands aren't terribly long and I don't have to worry about them being too accurate, I'm just going to set the brush to screen. 60% should be fine. I might even go lower than that. I'm going to do a couple experimental strokes here, just to see how it looks. 60% should be fine. So there we go. And I'm just going to go around like this. So you'll see that I'm defining little threads throughout it. And this will ultimately become the texture of that fuzz that I have going around her. So this is just a nice quick way to do it. In fact, I'm going to increase the opacity of it so I can get some more definitive strokes from it. There we go. Just like that. Yep, I'm calling it the fluffy stuff. I'm sticking to it. And it's alright if there are little imperfections with it, because we're just mostly trying to get the texture of it. And if it was to be super perfect like the hair, well, then it would look too much like the hair. And we don't want that. We want the hair to stand out on its own. let's do the other one. These ones around the neck are going to be the most time-consuming ones because they're the biggest ones. The ones around her arms shouldn't take nearly this long. Yep, this one is going to go up on DA the moment I'm done. And it's going to be used as a front to promote these tutorials that I've been doing for the last couple days. And then once this goes up on DA, I got some writing to get started on. Gonna make that venture into literature finally. Now I'm not gonna stop coloring, of course, but I'm not gonna be coloring nearly as much as I was for the last couple months, because that was really taking a lot out of me. I was almost burnt out completely from that. Yes, this is Kingdom Hearts soundtrack that you're listening to. Yeah, the last couple months were very hectic, because what happened was I'd opened myself up for commissions, and the idea was I was going to just work full-time on commissions and leave it at that, as kind of a way to make ends meet and make a living. But then a day job that I was pining for a while actually presented itself, so I took that. But unfortunately, by the time I took the day job, I'd already set myself up for a huge number of commissions. A lot of them were time sensitive, so it made for a really interesting couple of weeks as I was getting all those out of the way. And I've still got commissions that I got promised to other people. So like Jamie Faye and Assassina, when she sends me something, I haven't forgotten about her. I also got some sequential work that I'm going to be doing for Jesse Witchman as well. But I've actually got this major literature project planned with this guy Curran, who we've seen come into the stream a few times. So he and I are actually going to be co-authoring a book together. And it's not going to be like a short story or anything. This thing's going to be novel length. So probably a couple months are going to go into that. Maybe a few hours a night. Just get something out by the summertime. And we are pretty serious about it too. We've already got cover artwork, we already got pre-readers set up for it, so they're pretty much ready for us to get started on it. We've already got ourselves a bit of an art blitz ready to hit the scene. So yeah, we are going to be legit when we go into this. Yep. It's not going to be expensive on me. I'm not the one who's paying for it. I'm just one of the co-writers for it. I'm probably going to be writing the bulk of it, but when it comes to ideas and character and stuff, Curran's got a pretty good head on his shoulder for that. So I'm kind of more of an action-based writer. He's kind of more romance and comedy kind of a thing. So we're going to have this sort of a kind of like a what was it, a national treasure kind of thing going. It's gonna feel a lot like an old time adventure story is what we're going for. Well, Cardine, if you want to pre-read, talk to Curran about it. He usually comes into these streams as well. Though for our pre-readers, we are requiring to have people who aren't those types of people who read it once and go, "It's good. I understood what was going on." And we also need pre-readers who can also afford the time and, you know, don't just read it and make corrections while they're reading it for the first time. What we expect is we want a pre-reader who reads it once and then, knowing what happens, reads it again, and then on the third time through, then starts making corrections and coming up with ideas to make it better. That's the kind of attention to detail that we need. And when it comes to the chapters, we're aiming for 15 to 20 page chapters on this. So reading it a few times is going to require a bit of a time commitment as well. Yeah, definitely do talk to him about it. Alright, so let's hear. Now that I got the texture down for those little fuzzy bits, let us create our shadow layer using the action I made in the actions tutorial. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase away the bulk, the center of it, like that. And then I'm going to use the smudge tool, just kind of pull it out like this. So set to 80% good, even smaller brush than that. Going out, in, out, in, out, in, out, pushing it in, pushing it out, pushing it in. And then just doing a bunch of strokes kind of side by side like this. Yeah, well, Cardine, if I get some time off to do some pre-reading of my own for other people, definitely send it my way. And I told Curran that I was going to start writing it probably sometime around next week, but I'm actually probably going to start as early as tonight. Once I get this done, I'm probably going to put an hour or so into it. Because the way I write is I don't write linearly. I don't write from the beginning to the ending in a chronological order. I like to get the synopsis down, and I find the set pieces in the synopsis that I think would be the most difficult to write. And that's where I start, is I get the most difficult bits out of the way first, while the story is still fresh. And once I get those difficult parts down, it's easier to write a plot around that, so that if there are going to be discrepancies in the narrative that I find later on, it's easier to write around it in the easier parts than in the really hard, you know, like the big reveal, the big climactic scene. So I've actually got the ending of the story probably 80% written already. And the ending chapter is kind of run out of control right now. How I said it was going to be 10 to 15 pages per chapter. This one's at 65 pages so far. It's over 25,000 words right now. So yeah, like I said, I'm taking this novel thing a wee bit seriously. Yeah, so once I get the ending done, then I'm going to go straight into... actually, before doing the beginning, I want to get a certain mid part done because it's a part that Curran really wants and I kind of don't. Something I threw his way for an idea because I'm not really a big fan of romance. But oh man. He's given me the go-ahead to come up with a romantic scene that has kind of a messed up twist in it. Like I don't mean like any sort of romantic deviancy, if you catch my drift, but something that's a little bit disturbing in some regard, kind of as a metaphor for representing how we kind of throw ourselves at each other. You know, kind of how we let ourselves be enslaved at some points. Yeah, I can't go adultish in this one. I've got to keep it... I can't even go PG-13. It's got to be PG. Yeah, this one's going to be all audiences, basically. It's going to be as tame as Twilight, but it's not going to have all the pompous undertones and the hidden Christian ideologue woven into it. Yeah, you got to be careful with the dialogue and romantic scenes, and this is why I don't like doing it. Is because even if you get it right and you get it accurate, you're writing dialogue that's going to make a lot of people groan. Because if you were to read, like, a great example is the Valentine cards that my dad writes to my mom, I can't even make it halfway through one before I want to throw up. But it turns my... It's exactly the right words. It works for mom, so I can't criticize. I still have some love letters somewhere in my email archives. I should read some of those just to make myself wince. Oh, I was terrible in high school. But my girlfriend loved them, so whatever works, you know? But that's why I don't like doing romantic scenes, is because I have to write words that are kind of words I've written to other people, I guess. Unless I can really get into my character's head. But even still, the way people handle romance in their everyday lives is just so wildly different that there is no definitive example of the right and wrong way to do a love letter. So when it comes to a romantic scene and like the sweet nothings they whisper into each other's ear, ugh, I'm gonna lose a lot of readers with that kind of stuff, so I gotta handle it very gingerly. Like, have you ever watched The Bachelor, for example? I mean, everything they say to each other on that show is scripted, but it's so bad. But these women are just lapping it up, and I say it's like, I know they're all acting, because no woman in her right mind would want to have these words said to her. And then my mom calls me up later on. She's like, I just saw an episode of The Bachelor. It was so sweet. So what works for some people doesn't work for others. And I don't know, judging by my luck, when I handle romance, it's going to be... it's probably not even going to be potent enough for most people. I'm going to be so tame with it. They're going to be like, what are they doing? They're just like staring at each other, not even making any progress. Why am I reading this? People are going to go into it wanting them to start like boinking each other or something. It's like, nope, not going to happen. That is one realm I am not going to get into because I just can't put that into words. Mostly because the act itself, when you put it on paper and when you have to describe it with words, the act itself is just so ridiculous. Whenever I see it written in novels, I just burst out laughing because it's like, oh my god, that is what we do. We're so terrible. I'd at least imply it so that we can, you know, just run our own little scenario through our head. Because I don't want the author's scenario. Because then it feels like I'm getting down with the author and not the characters. And it's like, yo, author, I don't want you doing that to me. I feel like you're violating me. But yeah, rest assured that we're not even going to get close to that stuff. It's just going to be lovey-dovey, cuddly, wuddly, whatevers. In fact, if I were to make it cheesy and bad on purpose, in a way that the reader knows that I don't want to handle this, it could actually improve upon the experience. Which I've seen done before. Alright, so let's here, just getting the rim lights down on these. Gonna want a little bit more of a highlight right here. I guess that's 20% opacity, like so. Pulling it around like that, like that. Do a little bit like that. Oh yeah, I know, people are gonna listen in on the narration. For those of you confused, I'm actually having a conversation with people in the live stream chat. Which I guess if I were to have a tutorial on how to have a good live stream session, it's to not just talk to yourself all the time, or talk to those whom you expect to catch it later on, but to also talk to people in the room as well. And to occasionally bring in a saucy subject every now and then, in this case, over-the-top adult-laden romance and novels. Right? Yep. Yep, they're agreeing with me. Because then it just keeps them in the room, so that when certain things happen, like your mic disconnects or your stream goes down, there'll be people in the room to tell you that stuff has gone wrong. So if I were to do that when I began these tutorials, and actually interact with people a little bit earlier on, I would have had people telling me that the audio was out of balance, that the music was too loud, and that my mic wasn't up high enough. Anyway, let's just keep on going here. Yeah, we got other people in here that are saying, oh, good to know that, because I just thought this person in the chat room was just talking to herself. Yeah, Cardine, I actually said that in an earlier tutorial. Talk to yourself while you work. Just kind of narrate what you're doing, because what it does is it forces your brain to concentrate on what you're doing and to evaluate it. Because when your ears hear it, you actually evaluate what you're doing twice. You know, the first time when you think about it, and then when you put it down, you see it with your eyes, and then when you hear it, you evaluate it a second time. So this is kind of cool, how the way the mind works like that. So let's see here. That's in the realm of, yep, good enough. So I just need a little bit of rim lighting right there from the yellow. And there we go. Maybe a little bit right here. There you go, looking good. So we just gotta do the ball of yarn, the linens, and then we'll be set. So let's save this, save the backup. Well, Cardine, I'm doing limited commissions right now. They're not open to the public, but if you were to note me on DeviantArt and just be like, hey, would you have time to maybe do this image? You know, since I'm not open to the public, that means that I'm just not going to take anything. Like if people have high detail covers or sequential pages they need me to do, I unfortunately can't fit those in. But if someone were to send me an image that's, you know, for example, this image right here, where it's just a single character pinup, and if you were to ask, do you have time to do that, then yeah, I could probably fit that in, no problem. It's just that I have to consider my commissions officially closed so that people don't just send anything in my direction all willy-nilly. So let's see here. Gonna get the yarn texture down. I'm gonna go with a higher opacity, not 30%. Let's go with 60%. There we go. So just getting that yarn texture down by doing these slightly curved diagonal lines going down like that. So you'll notice that it's the same kind of a curve that I put into every single stroke, and I just go in a line making that same curve. So it's kind of like being my own little spiral graph, if you remember those from the 80s and the 90s. Do they still make those nowadays? I don't know. Now, well, Cardine, I can't talk too much about my day job, unfortunately. I will say that it's in the video games industry, and that's about the extent of what I can say. Because I gotta be very hush-hush about this. Yeah, you may remember that I was writing another novel. I was writing my memoirs from 2011, about the time I spent laid off. And it was called Laid Off. And I was going to take it to completion, but once this new job came along that I was pining for, I promptly stopped writing that, simply because it could look negatively upon me, because I was giving a little bit of a perspective into how much of a physical toll I was taking while working in the video games industry. And after seeing some other stories of people who were writing similar articles based upon working in the video games industry, and seeing these people get blacklisted, that I started to realize that, you know, if having a job is more important, and if I was really so butthurt over my work that I felt compelled to write memoirs over it, I would have to do some really good soul searching and figure out, do I want to stay in this industry and continue working myself to the bone, or do I want to get out and not have a job and be unemployed? And I'm prompted to stay in the industry because I have a lot of passion towards the work that I do as well. I actually like what I do. And I got a lot of really good people whom I work with. And I've built up some pretty good connections in there. So I had a really good thing, and all things considered, it's kind of like It sounds like you went through hell and back, but would I do it again? Absolutely. So let's see here. That ball of yarn is now textured. Just to recap, that whole texturing process, I didn't have to switch between brushes or anything. It's just a series of small strokes done in succession of one another, with the brush mode set to screen and the opacity set to 60%. So I didn't have to use any special brushes or anything. I just set the brush to screen and went at it. So let's do what we usually do. Set it to purple, press my shortcut key to create the new shadow mask. And since it's a ball, balls are the easiest thing to shade. So you just go bam, 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 just like that. Gonna do some extra shading just kind of around the edge like that. Just kind of define the shape a little bit more. Yep, so anyway, I had that book, it was probably about halfway written by the time I stopped. But I figured that my job was more important than getting it published, so I had to unfortunately stop working on it. Because it could have gotten me in trouble if it was read the wrong way. So it was risky for me to actually write that thing, and I knew that when I started writing it. But when I started writing it, I kind of didn't expect to get pulled back into the games industry. But when the job presented itself and I started to see that people were shuffling my name around HR departments and that I was getting these job offers, that was kind of when everything changed. And what's nice about this job is that I can still do commissions, so I'm not abandoning my aspirations to become a colorist. I'm going to be doing some coloring work for sequential work for Jesse Witchman pretty soon, and I can wrangle it with my current schedule. I know I can. In fact, he and I just did we had a very special commission for a very special big profile client, and I don't know if I can say who it was, but they are quite the online presence. I will just put it like that. We're talking like one of the major players in the whole online experience. And he was able to find a comic job for them, and he had me come on as his colorist. So he basically said, I need you to do a cover and 3 sequential pages. You have 2 days to do it. And I don't think he knew I had a day job at the time. So he probably didn't realize just what kind of a bind he put me into, but that was many late nights. That was 3 late nights in a row where I did not get a lot of sleep. And fortunately, one of those nights I got to work on was a Friday, so I was able just to blow through until I passed out. But just seeing that I was able to handle that on top of my day job leaves me confident in knowing that I can handle doing sequential pages with him later on, because we're not going to have as intense of a time schedule. So it's all going to be alright. Alright, that ball of yarn is in the good enough range. I'm tempted to change its color though. Let's see what we can do here. So that's what we have. Okay. Nah. Okay, that'll work. Kind of blue, cyan. Nah, not blends in too much with the background. Getting there. Alright, awesome, yeah. If people were to plug those tutorials, I would really appreciate it. Let's see here, that blue color, it's kind of working for me. If I take it halfway. There we go. So it stands apart. There we go. So I'm going to select all these layers, merge them together, merge it into the fills that I have so far. So there we go, the character is now done. Last thing I'm going to do is the linens. The linens are pretty easy. I'm just going to handle them the same way I did all the other fabrics. So I'm going to go to my flats layer, select my color wand, select the linens, and I'm going to press Ctrl J to separate them out. Let's see here. And if the light's coming from the upper right, let's just start out kind of simple, straightforward like this. Not 100%, let's go 40%. Just make a blotch to start out with, and then we're going to use the smudge tool. There we go. So you'll see that with the smudge tool, if you really hit the edge of a blotch like that, you get a really nice fabric out of it. So kind of, you know, shapeless blotch put out in the middle, and then if you use the smudge tool and just pull the edge, kind of like that, you get a really nice linen fabric texture like that. So I'm going to blend it a little bit like that. Go. Now one of the oddest things that, and this still kind of bothers me, but I work in the video games industry and I hardly play video games. I mean, with exception to the one that I'm assigned to be on right now, but when it comes to playing other games, I have this huge list of games that I want to play and just haven't had the time. Top of that list is Batman Arkham City. I have not played that one all the way through yet. I'm only about a third of the way through it. And just the last couple of weeks, there have been some great releases that have come out. I want to play Fez, I want to play Journey. I still haven't even started Skyrim yet. Yeah, I just don't have the time anymore. I miss the good old days when I could just get through a single game in a few hours. I mean, I used to be able to beat Mega Man back in just maybe like 2-3 hours of play. Probably my favorite game that I had growing up was on the NES, and it was Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers. Because it had not only a really awesome soundtrack, but also because I could just get through it so fast. And none of my friends played it. So every time I'd bring it over to a friend's house, we'd pop it in, and to their surprise, it was actually a really good game. And we just play it all the way through, but since we could get through it in just a couple of hours, it made for a really good social experience. So that became a very common thing between myself and my friends growing up, was playing Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers on the NES. Alright, there we go. So, all that is set. It's going to have the drop shadow of the character right there. That linen's drop shadows, more drop shadows, a little bit more drop shadow like that. And then kind of have a shadow of it falling in like that right there. Let's merge them together. And I'm going to give that linen a little bit of a texture. So I have a brush that I forgot what I called it. It was something like a doodad brush or something. It's called Smidgen. I have a Smidgen brush. That's what I called it. This is just something I made spontaneously. I don't know what I based it off of. But I found out that when I set it to color dodge and I turned down its flow to about 30%. Let me go a little bit higher than that. 50%, flow 50%. It actually gives me a pretty good fabric. Oh, that's too much. It actually gives me a pretty good fabric effect. So I think it was trying to make sand or something that I made this brush. And it turns out that it works a lot better for fabric. And that's kind of what a lot of my brushes are, with the exception of clouds, because those are just straightforward, obvious. But I have a sand brush that I instead use for fabric. And when I figured that out, instead of throwing it away and starting from scratch, kept it and swore by it. Yep, this is Little Big Planet 2 soundtrack that we're listening to. Another game I need to play. I own it too. I own Little Big Planet and I haven't even played it. And I work in the video games industry. What is wrong with me? I mean, because I do this all the time. Because Photoshop is my favorite video game. Oh, you gotta play it though. Just like me. I am so beating myself up over it because I have not played it, but yeah. Anyway, if you remember that when I first created the signature, I said make it a ridiculous color so you don't forget about it. Well, I just saw it, figured it was a ridiculous color, and like that, didn't forget about it. So I'm going to select it as I would select anything else by going to the flats layer using the color wand. I'm going to press Ctrl J to separate it. And I'm just going to move the new layer, instead of keeping it there, I'm going to move it all the way to the top, and I'm just going to call it my signature layer, just like that. So there we go. So now it appears over the lines. I can set it to whatever color I want. So for this, I'm just going to set it to white for now. I can always change it later on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock it. I'm going to hide it. So it's always going to be there. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my flats layer, select it again, select my brush, hold down Alt. I'm going to click the background color right there, and then I'm going to hold down Alt and press Delete. So now I've deleted the signature. And what you see there of the signature is actually in the line art layer, and I can just keep it there. As long as the signature is still in place at the top here, I don't have to worry about destroying the signature when I do the background. Now for the background, this one's going to be really simple. I'm going to select it like this, and I imagine it just being a wall or something for the background. So this is what my background looks like. It looks kind of like this. But so I'm not confined by those edges. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to fill the new layer with that blue color. And then I'm going to hold down Alt and click between those two layers I just made. So now I can actually paint a background in this layer right here, layer 2. And I can create all sorts of adjustments and effects that go beyond the edges, and they'll still be there. Whatever effects will still be in that space, because it's being confined by a different layer. So here we go. Bring out all that. I'm just going to save this really quickly. Good. So for example, let me create even a new layer right there. And if I were just, you know, paint a little shape or something like this that even goes behind her head like this, if I were to move it around, it still appears. So it's not being erased by layer 1 right here. So that means that when I do certain things, like if I were to transform it, resize it, bend it around, or change its color, it changes everything in the scene. Or it changes everything on layer 2, and not just what's confined by layer 1. So let's delete that. And first things first, let's get a texture down. So for the texture of the background, I'm going to use that smidgen brush I used for the linens. I'm just going to set it to multiply. As surfaces reach closer to the ground or closer to the viewer, they tend to grow darker, and that's not actually what happens in real life, but it's an effect that people use to establish a greater sense of depth in a scene. What's further away is lighter, what's closer is darker. So let's keep on going there. In fact, I'm going to make the opacity and flow 50% right there. There we go. And now for the, going to get that first rim light in. Going to set its color dodge, 20% opacity, 20% flow. Let's see how this looks. It doesn't even appear. So let's go with 50-50. Kind of like that. Even more intense, just like that. And then just a little bit of yellow, like that. And then where her, where she'd be, where that spotlight would be cast, just a little bit like that. And then, oldest trick in the book for setting the shadow behind her. Check this out. I'm going to take all the fills that I've done. So all of these fills that I've done so far, ooh, Mr. Eyebrows, I'll get those in a second. All these fills that I've done so far, just make those visible again. I'm going to copy them. So now I have a kind of a separate copy of all that. And let me just copy it again. Flats. Yeah. Alright, so there we go. So this is what she looks like without the lines, and she actually looks pretty good without the lines. It's not very common that happens. But anyway, like I said, oldest trick in the book is I'm going to take this new layer that I made of the fills, so these two layers here are identical, and I'm just going to move it like this. Going to press Control T to bring up this transformation box. Going to make her smaller by holding down Alt and Shift and clicking on one of the corners. Not that much smaller. Pull her out like this. What I might even do is angle her down, kind of like this, to make it look like the wall is at an angle, and you'll see what I'm doing here in just a second. So now that I have a copy of her separated out and kind of behind her, looks a little bit like a reflection, but I'm not doing a reflection. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kill the lightness of it, and I am actually making it a shadow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock the layer opacity by pressing this icon right here. I'm going to select my shadow color, and I'm going to press Alt and Delete. And since it has the layer opacity locked, it's only going to make the stuff that's in the layer purple. It's not going to make the whole layer purple, just what's already in there. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to multiply. And I'm going to reduce the fill of it just a little bit. So now we have something that looks like a shadow behind her. So just a nice, simple, easy, instant drop shadow effect like that. I could even, if I wanted to, go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I can just give her a really simple, hold on, wait. I have to unlock the layer's opacity right there, so there we go. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, there we go. Gotta turn that down a fair bit. Just a really simple, easy Gaussian blur like that. So now it looks even a little bit fuzzy around the edges. And then, yeah, if I wanted some extra effects in here, like let's say I wanted to have like the reflected light of a window appearing somewhere in the scene, that's no problem at all. So let's say that the window was going to be moonlight or something. I actually have moonlight color swatches. So let's just say it's poking through a very narrow, what do we call those? Blinders, shades. I have it set in this layer right here, so I created a new layer and I made a very narrow rectangle like this. I'm going to hold down Alt to create a duplicate of it. Just going to pull it down like that, and you'll see it create a whole new layer. And just very quickly, I'm going to merge it by pressing Control E. And then again, I'm going to hold down Alt, click, drag it down, and I'm going to press Control E. And I am actually growing this exponentially. And that's all that I need right now. It's actually, in retrospect, they're not far enough apart, so I'm just going to undo, undo, undo. There we go. I want about that far. And I'm just going to go in the flats really quickly because I forgot to set these. Her eyebrows and her eyelashes, I don't need to shade them or anything, but I'm going to separate them out from the flats. And before shading them, I'm just going to merge them straight into it. If I need to, I can just reduce the lightness of the eyebrows. Get myself a nice, easy, hard brush. Set to linear dodge. Maybe just sample something from the hair. And just very quickly get our eyebrows in like that. There we go. Anyway, back to the light of the blinders right here. I can hold down Control, Alt, and Shift. And if I click on a corner while holding down Control, Alt, and Shift, this happens. It kind of scrunches it outward, like in perspective. And if I hold down Control and drag the edge like that, I get that going on. So I'm going to shrink it down like that. I'm going to blur it, and I'm actually going to blur it a bit. Just kind of like that. And I'm going to set the mode of the layer to screen, and I'm really going to reduce the opacity of it. And now let's merge all these together, kind of like that. Looking good, looking good. And it's a little bit too purplish for my taste, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to desaturate it, reduce the lightness, and it's going to be blue. So more of a cyan, greenish blue. Now you'll see that I have a couple rim lights in here for yellow and for purple, and I can add those in right now actually. So I'm going to use the same pink color that I used to create those rim lights. I'm going to set it to color dodge, and I'm just going to create a couple blotches right here, or a couple of spots like that. There we go. So now we have something that looks like there's a purple light source coming from off the side of the screen, and I'm going to do the same for the yellow that I have up there. And again, I'm just going to affect the curves to make the whole thing a bit darker. Alright, and the background is done. So just a really simple, not very detailed background plate. Might even make it even more cyan than it is right now. Desaturate it even further. Because you don't want the background taking over and overpowering the foreground character. The background still has to be hardly noticeable. So, even darker. There we go. I can poke at a background for as long as I want, but if it's in the territory of good enough where the character stands out, that's fine. So let's merge all these together. Merge it in there. And there we go. When I control click on the layer with all the fills in it, I don't see any selections showing me that I missed any spots. So I am happy with that. Now here comes the last big major part, which is the adjustment layers. So here's the part where it gets a little bit hairy, a little bit awesome. So, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm just going to call it layer 2. I'm going to set the new layer to linear dodge and fill with linear dodge neutral color or black. And just so I know it when I see it, it's going to be yellow. So now the layer appears yellow, so I know that's going to be where my glare is. And since it's set to linear dodge and has the black background, it works really well for making bloom effects. So where things are really bright, it kind of creates a glow around those bright objects. So I'm going to select this hair color, keep it at linear dodge. Let's go with 20% opacity, 100% flow. So there we go. Just pulling out that hair color, giving it a super shine like that. I'm even doing the same here with the fuzzies around her neck, like right there. But where I really want it to be is on this gem right here. And it's going to be kind of small, but it's going to be very intense. So 50% opacity set to this green color, and you'll see that I get a really good bright shine like that, even around the edge of it, like right there. And if I really want to drive it home, I made a brush right here so that I'll zoom in on this. So if I were to make it white, and if I just tap this brush once on top of a highlight, it gives it kind of a gleam to it. So let me put another one right there, and then another one right there. So now it really gives shine to that gemstone. And I can do the same around the spotlights here on the PVC latex suit. So just giving them these little crosses of specular shine that really pop out. I can even put it right here. So a nice one like that right there. So now she looks really shiny. And I've seen a lot of people do this. I'm trying to remember his name. He does a lot of fan art. Yeah, I've seen a lot of artists do that. And there we go. This is actually complete enough. I don't have to do any post effects, but I'll do some post effects anyway, just to show how I do it. And one of my favorite post effects uses these adjustment layers. Let me zoom in down here on them. So adjustment layers are these right here. And they are pretty awesome. I figured them out when I was doing photography back in the mid-2000s. But they work especially well in comics as well, because you get all these effects that you're used to, adjusting levels, curves, color balance, and brightness contrast. But what it allows you to do is, let me just do this really quickly, is let's say I were to create a hue saturation layer where I completely desaturate the image. You'll see it completely desaturates the image, and if I were to lighten it like this, that doesn't look good at all, but this is just for demonstration purposes. I can actually reduce the opacity of that layer so that the amount at which the adjustment layer affects everything underneath it can be adjusted through the opacity of that layer, or the fill of that layer. Another thing I can do is kind of how I erase away the shadows, is you'll see this also comes with a layer mask, and if you were to erase away this layer mask, you'll see that I can actually erase it away, just as I was doing with the shadows. So I'll show you how that comes into play later on. So let's delete that layer because it's terrible, and we're going to go with hue saturation, and I'm just going to start by turning down the saturation of it. And the reason why I turn down the saturation is that when I do the color balance, since it's a little bit desaturated, it gives me a little bit more leeway for adjusting other things. Like I can make the image warmer if I wanted to, I can make it cooler if I wanted to. So I'm actually going to make the image a little bit cooler. However, I'm going to make the light source from the upper right warm the image, and what it's going to do is it's going to erase away the layer mask right there. So let's go with a really big brush like that with the eraser selected. I'm going to set it to a 40% brush opacity, and then just like this, you'll see that it starts to erase it away, and I can actually strategically warm up certain parts of the image as I go around like this. So now I get a better disconnect. So I get the nice blue from the background that I want, and you'll also see that from the other stuff that I did, from the stuff I erased, I'm still able to keep the skin tones how I want them. So let's really pull that out, and for the hue saturation, I can do the same thing. I'm going to erase it away right there so I can get my skin tones back. Just like that. Alright. And then if I want the gem, for example, to really stand out, I can do a similar thing. Create a new adjustment layer, and again, I'm going to go with color balance. I'm really going to pull out the green in it. I'm going to go to my highlights for the color balance. Really going to pull out that yellow, give it a little bit of green, even maybe a little bit of red. Then I'm going to go to my shadows. I'm going to make the shadows cyan blue like this. Maybe a bit more green. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control I, which means invert. So whatever's white's black and whatever's black's going to be white. Since everything in this layer mask is white, it's going to make it black now. So I press Control I to invert it. And then I'm going to go to my eraser, and I'm going to swap it around. So now, let me zoom in on this so we can see it as I do it. I'm going to set the eraser's opacity to 100%, and you'll see I'm just really giving a lot of green to that emerald. And in fact, I'll let it bleed over out a little bit. I'll let that green bleed out a little bit into the surrounding fills, like where her latex suit is, to really show that there's light being cast through it. So it makes it look like it's reflecting a bit of the green light right there. And I'm just doing all this with the adjustment layers. I'm not painting on the fills layer at all. And then just like that, if I toggle the visibility, you'll see that now that gem really stands out. And if I think it stands out a little bit too much, like I honestly think it does, I'll just lower the opacity of the color balance layer, like so, and then I'll pull it back until I find something that looks good. So I'll try to find a nice balance between the two. So kind of like that. And I can just go around the whole scene if I want to, putting in adjustment layers and modifying certain parts until I think they're fine. I could even go so far as to go to the flats, and if I think that the skin tones need some adjustment, I'll just go to the flats layer, select my color wand. I'll select all the skin tones, like so. And then if I were to create a new adjustment layer, check this out. Let's say I wanted the skin tones to be darker. I'll adjust it with the curves. And check this out. Before I set the curves, you'll see right here that it has already created an alpha channel based upon the selection I just had. and what I just had selected was the skin tones. So this curves adjustment layer is now going to affect only my skin tones. So you'll see that when I double click on the icon right here, the layer thumbnail, see how it's only affecting the skin tones, and I don't want it to go that far. But just make it a little bit darker, like that. And I could even take it a step further by control clicking. So I hold down control, and I'm going to click on the layer mask like this, and I'm going to create a whole new color balance adjustment layer. Let's say that I want the skin tone to be a little bit more magenta, like so. Maybe a little bit more red, like that. A bit more yellow, like so. Just kind of warm it up a little bit like that. There we go. And I can always go back to previous adjustment layers. So let's say that instead of wanting it to go dark, I want it to go light, like that. You know, it's really simple, easy to adjust. So let's get this somewhere in the realm of where I want it to be. Kind of like that. That looks good. And I don't want it to be as magenta. So I can just poke around at this as much as I want to. But honestly, skin tones, they're good enough as is. So I'm just going to run with them like that. And yeah, that's pretty much how adjustment layers work. And then if I wanted to do a, you know, like a really dramatic scene, for example, I mean, I'm pretty much done right now. This is what the finished image is going to look like, but let's say that I wanted it to be really dramatic. This is how I usually do super dramatic scenes, is really desaturate it, and then go into color balance, really pull out the reds, the yellows, and the magentas, like that. Make the highlights really yellow, the shadows really reddish magenta if I want to. So the scene is now a lot more dramatic. And I could even go a step further. Sorry, not curves. Go to color balance. Make another adjustment layer where I make everything like super blue or something. And then I'm going to invert by pressing Control I so it doesn't show up. And I'm going to use the gradient tool instead of the eraser, set it to normal, turn up the opacity of it, set it to white. So now it's going to paint white in the layer mask right here. And when it does that, it applies that filter all the way through. So now after I do this a couple of times, let's even take it one step further. Go with yellow, green, a little bit of red, lots of white like that. Invert it. Pull it down like that, and you'll start to see that we get these really dramatic lighting schemes. So now we have something that, this almost looks like a Gemstone piece now, for those of you who know the guy on DeviantArt. And that's one way to get these really bright, vibrant, beautiful colors, is just by using adjustment layers to kind of fudge your way through it. Now, Gemstone is a really accomplished painter who's really good at what he does, and as this is more of a gimmick, he is a master of the craft. So don't think that just by doing this you can automatically fool people into thinking you've got a Gemstone. Don't insult the man like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete these because that was done for illustrative purposes, because this is kind of how I want it to be. I even want it to be saturated. In fact, not even there. I'm going to do a whole new saturation layer just to pull it out just a little bit like that. Maybe even darken it a little bit. Or like, darken it. Maybe not as saturated. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah. And I don't want this. I notice that the skin tones look a little bit overblown in this, so I'm just going to select it in the flats layer, go back to the layer mask in that hue saturation layer I just made, and I'm just going to delete it. So there we go. Makes the whole thing a little bit more vibrant. Another thing I noticed, her eyes seem a little bit too bright and vibrant. They look like they're mutant eyes or something, and I don't want that, so I'm going to tone them down with the curves. And on top of that, I'm going to go with hue saturation. I'm going to reduce the lightness of them as well. There we go. And make them a lot more yellow. There we go. So in the end, I've created all of these adjustment layers like this. And just a good way to keep track of them is I create a new folder. I name the folder Post for, you know, post-processing and post-image effects. And I'm just going to move all of those into there. So now I can get a definitive before and after. And in this image, the before and after isn't as dramatic as it is with a lot of other images that I've made. But for the more dramatic ones, I'll even take the post folder and I'll reduce the opacity of it, and you'll see that I can even reduce just how much all of those effects will influence the fills underneath it. So yeah, let's keep it at 100%. I'm going to create a new layer above it. And remember how there's kind of a light source from the upper right that's beaming into the bottom left? Let's create that light source. So here we go. Just a little bit of overlapping light like that. In fact, not even that much. And if I want to have like even little dust and particulates in the air, I made a brush for that. I usually use this for star fields, but I'm going to use it for everything else in here. So just going to do a quick dust. That's too much. So there we go, just a little bit of an environmental effect. And there we go. And now for the hardest thing that I have to do with the whole image. Bite the bullet and call it done. So, chat window, you guys still awake? What do you think of it? Are we good? Are we set? Yeah? Alright, cool. I'm going to bed. Thanks all for swinging by. Much appreciated your company and your input, and I hope that this tail end of the tutorials of just wrapping everything up has been a help for you. I know that it's kind of a lot of different concepts thrown on at once, but that's kind of how every image is done. It's just a succession of tips and tricks and going into it fresh. So this isn't so much a formula for doing certain things as much as it was just looking at things analytically and trying to figure out ways to do it. It's more of a critical thinking exercise than a tutorial. So hopefully this has been some sort of insight to help you guys, what am I trying to say here? To think how to approach your images as you do them, and just to develop the confidence and the knowledge that if you keep your layers all separated out and organized, you're not going to destroy an image that you're working on. To just always remember to have backups and contingency plans in case you do something absolutely stupid. So let's just get this all saved up. Saving the backup. And then, yep, we are done. So I'm going to be posting this one on DeviantArt. Thanks all of you for swinging by, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next live stream. And since I won't be doing a tutorial on it, we can probably talk more about adult novels and dirty scenes and more vulgar material like that. I can hardly wait for that. So thanks all for swinging by. I'll see you next time.